This episode of The Imperfects discusses violence and consent. If these are topics you don't feel like you can engage with today, you may want to skip this one and come back when you're ready.
I wish so much I just switched my brain on in those situations and actually thought like a good person rather than I'm going to be entertaining and get currency here. And there were like 18-year-olds at the club. There were like young boys there who would look up to me as a senior player at the club, life member at the club, and then I'm passing this rot on to them. Like I look back on that with great sadness.
The Imperfects invites you into a very safe place. A place where we share without judgment and drink heaps of vulnerability. Grab yourself a cup. This is the Vulnerabilitea House.
Well, here we are. We've popped up in your feed. Sorry if you didn't want that, but we're here.
Yeah, well, you don't have to keep listening if you don't want to.
That's true.
It's not compulsory listening.
Yeah, it's not.
But it kind of is.
It's important listening. It's
It
very
is important listening. Yeah, I think, well, hopefully.
So we're here because, well, for a variety of reasons, but we had future Australian of the Year, Chanel Contos.
Yeah, not many people would be called future Australian of the Year, but she hopefully
no
is.
question. There's absolutely no question.
No question.
She will be one day.
Yeah.
It's just doing the most important work. We had her on the show and we were talking to her about consent. Her book, Consent Laid Bare, is quite incredible. She's taking on rape culture in Australia, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very moved by that chat we had with her. This season, we did an episode on men's violence towards women, and we had an imperfect chat about that as three men. And we've constantly been looking for ways to continue those imperfect conversations because we think it's important that men talk about this, acknowledging that they will be very much imperfect conversations.
We realised that we're men, so we could be those people.
We could, yeah. And we're severely imperfect, so it's kind of like a good combo. And in chats with Chanel and the incredible people at Teach Us Consent, which is the group that Chanel has created, we decided to do a collaboration, which you might have seen on Instagram. We created digital cards with Teach Us Consent, where we actually merged our Vulnerabilitea House cards with consent questions, basically.
Mm-hmm. It feels like a real honour for them to be willing to work with us. I feel like, oh God, are we at that level? You're willing to risk your reputation with us?
I don't think we are at their level, but it was nice. It was very nice.
I know, but that's why I'm like, you sure?
Yeah.
So I feel like very privileged.
Yeah. I hope we played it cool when they asked us. But
well, if we did then, we'd not now. Absolutely ruined it.
So we put those digital cards out on Instagram, and then we thought, well, why don't we actually? Because when you look at them, when you look at the actual questions, and if you haven't done so yet, you're about to find out what they are. They made me, as a man, they made me instantly really nervous. Just the thought of how you'd start to answer those. Even just to myself, like honestly reflecting to myself, how would I answer this?
I know.
It made me really nervous. And so we thought, well, this is a nice way, I think, for us to continue the conversation that we started last year with Chanel, and one that we think is so important to continue to have. So we're going to answer some of the questions now. We will draw the cards. We've actually, to be really honest, we wanted to look professional. So in the middle of the desk here, for those watching on YouTube, we have the cards, the Vulnerabilitea House cards, and we were going to try and make it look like they'd actually been printed out properly. They haven't. I just wrote them on a Post-it note and stuck them.
Well, also because, I mean, they're not actual real cards. They're digital cards.
Digicards,
and we've used Post-it notes to put the questions on. Yeah,
I feel like we're
a little bit of
delaying.
inside baseball.
We'll be delaying.
Should I pick up the first one?
Yeah, go for it.
First question. Growing up, where did you encounter violence? Was it condoned or unacceptable? Oh, I mean, like for me, I didn't. There wasn't really much violence in my childhood. The first thing that comes to mind is like at my school. I remember once there was a big fight on like the Oval. There was like this big fight and everyone came running from all different parts, and it was like one of those situations where this crowd, and it felt like weirdly, it felt kind of like exciting, but also when I got close, it was like scary because it's like, oh God, because I'm just hadn't been exposed and really haven't even to this point, like been exposed to like proper violence like that is out of a, boxing ring or, that sort of like schoolyard violence or like bar violence. Like I've seen like a few times at like pubs, like punches being thrown, but I'm been so sheltered when it comes to this stuff. So for me, like it definitely was not condoned, like extremely unacceptable for me because it just seemed like a catastrophic thing if there was violence.
Yeah, we were really lucky that there was no like violence in our house. Like when you think of violence, you think of like the first thing that comes to my mind is like physical violence, but obviously violence can take many forms. And I think we were really fortunate that we grew up in a household that was very anti-violence and very safe.
No, certainly not in our home. That I agree there was none. I just know that whenever there was violence at school, which wasn't a lot, or the threat of violence, that was like status.
Yeah.
Anyone who was able to threaten violence or was able to be violent, and there were stories about them being violent, that was like something to be revered, and that was cool, and that was like they were automatically the cool person because everyone was scared of them. So I do know that. I remember when I started in year 7, I went from we had a idyllic primary school, and I went to a high school, and there were 4 boys in my year in year 7 who would talk about stuff they did on the weekend. We don't know if it was true, but it was terrifying, the stuff they were doing, and I couldn't quite believe it. But they were like the cool guys. And it was because we're all scared of them. So it was like violence was the way that you assert yourself and dominate any group of people.
Yeah, I remember as we started going to pubs when I was getting older, I had a few of my mates got into fights a lot and I never did, and I was terrified of them. And I was kind of joked about as someone that you couldn't really rely on. And that was like an insult, like a bad thing.
You were talked about like that you couldn't rely on you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, never explicitly, but like it made me feel, it was kind of like, well, you're not going to get involved in this fight. But they would, and that was a negative. That was like,
yeah,
it was linked with a thing of disloyalty, I think, of like, you're not a loyal enough friend to back me up here. Yeah, it's pretty gross. I really hope we can grow out of that mentality. Like the idea, I think, especially with 2 sons, the idea of thinking that they'll get to a point in their life where they'll probably be faced with that thing, and it terrifies me now that I know and have lived a bit more and I know how ugly and disgusting and bad fights can get, that it terrifies me bringing 2 boys into the world and knowing that they're going to have to face that moral conundrum at some point.
Well, the situation you're bringing up it's a mentality that, like, if a fight's about to happen and one of the guys like, I'm not getting involved in this, it's like they're really weak or something wrong with them for doing it, as opposed to the person who wants to go and like punch someone in the face or whatever, be violent. Like, no, there's something wrong with you here. Like, if you want to go and go out to a pub and just to fight someone, like, there's something wrong with you, not the other way around. Yeah, I've never thought of it that way, but that's kind of the way it is. Well, that's the way it was for you in that situation.
Definitely. And I have no idea what it's like to be an 18, 19-year-old right now and what the dialogue around that is right now. Hopefully it's evolved a bit, but it was certainly, that was the narrative when I was 18 or 19.
Actually, we had a situation at school when I was in year 9, I think it was, and I was down like the bottom oval, and like 30 guys from another school just turned up. Turns out actually from Queensland, from another state. And they asked they came up to me as the first person, they said, do you know where so-and-so is, the guy they're looking for? And I knew him very well. I went, yeah, he'll be on the year 10 basketball court, just up there. And then they just like, as they were walking, I was like, oh, I don't think I should have said that. But word had got to this guy, and he had run, and he'd gone up to the rowers in year 12, like the really tough guys in year 12, and they hid him in one of their lockers, and they all stood in front of the lockers, all like the rowers.
Whoa.
And then the
Hang on,
police
so
came.
just to step back a sec, so all these guys had flown down from Queensland.
I've always wondered the logistics of it.
I know. Now I'm just thinking about, I mean, like, who's paying for the flights? Like, I don't know if that's like a necessary or helpful thing to think about, but I'm like, hang on, are they maxi taxiing from the airport? Like,
guys, meet at this time. Don't go in early by yourself. No, I've often wondered about the logistics of this, but this guy kissed someone's girlfriend in Noosa on the holidays, and this guy came down with like 30 people looking for him.
wow.
And they might have been 18 or 19, so like they were much older. And they came to the school anyway. The rowers hid this guy in the locker and stayed there until the police came, and these guys couldn't get in to find him. But for the rest of the year, like, it was like the rowers were like the heroes because they were willing to like fight these guys for this guy in year 10. The other thing is, so often for us growing up, certainly for me, or for us in the 90s, violence was condoned in so many spaces. So, and the one I think of is footy. Like there were video cassettes would come out with AFL Biffs, Bumps and Brawls.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like horrific violence.
That's right.
Horrific violence played in like in back then VFL footy or AFL footy maybe. But it was done with like comical noises and it was celebrated. You know, people, there's one I can think of where a guy picks up the ball and looks up and a guy runs through him with his elbow and completely smashes his face in. And I think the guy didn't play again potentially. And it's like the commentators love it, like the big celebration, but they do a comical sound effect as his face is just smashed in.
Yeah.
And violence in footy, for example, was
celebrated.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it was.
Yeah, you do.
And it's not anymore. That's changed very much so. But back then when we were growing up, that was like...
It's changed, but it's like there is still the odd player who is rough with the bump, and you still do hear, like in the crowd, good hit.
Oh,
like,
yes. Yeah,
good
totally.
hit, good hit. And like even though it's like they're doing something that's like technically within the rules, there are certain players, like the player who's coming to mind on the other end of the spectrum who's like such a good role model is like Max Gawn, who's just like I feel like he's never has like ill will to the other players. He's never like going out of his way to hurt someone or to hit someone hard. But there are players who still do that. And I think there is a section of not just footy, but just sport, like contact sport, within like the male world, where it's like that stuff is still a little bit celebrated.
Well, I
reckon.
Look, State of Origin is the fight that happened in Game 3 of State of Origin. It spilled over onto the sideline, and it was exciting. Like the commentators were so excited by it. All the commentary around it. Really intelligent men who I respect, listening to their opinions on sport. Like this is what the game is. This is great. This is what it means to these guys. And it was like, this is the message to young men was this is good. What's happening, and they can carry on as much as they want about like, I know State of Origin is different. This is where it means the world to them. Yeah, fine. I'm not questioning why they're doing it, but the messaging to young people is that what is happening right now, this violence, this is good.
This is exciting.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
And this is real men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Next question.
Next card. Society puts pressure on men to be and act a certain way. When do you feel this most, and how does it impact your behaviour? That sums up exactly what I was talking about before with relation to when I was younger and not being able to be the tough guy and jump into, well, and even using that phrase now, like the tough guy is the one that kind of will back up his mates.
Yeah. I mean, I have a fear that isn't like a constant fear, but it is something that in certain situations pops up in my head. This fear that like if I was with Jam, my partner Jam, and we were attacked or something, someone threatened us, I certainly don't trust myself to be able to like defend us, to be like the quote unquote like man to defend my lady's honor. And because in my mind, just because of everything we've been told, it's like, well, I should be the one who fights off the assailant.
Yeah.
Whereas like I'd trust Jam to protect us more than me, to be honest, in many ways. Whereas like I worry that I would not be able to like defend us.
Yeah. I certainly have a memory of when Penny and I were first together. It had been like maybe our fourth or fifth date, and we'd had a fair bit to drink, and we were walking through the city, and a group of guys, they were just being a bit rude to a girl who was walking in front of us, and they were just about to walk off. And Penny like yelled out to them that it was like what they were doing was really shit, and just basically told them what she thought of them. And they kind of turned around, and they were really drunk, and there was like 5 or 6, and they looked at both of us, and I can't remember what happened. Nothing came of it, but I got really funny about that to Penny, and I said, I love that she'd said something, but also I hated it because I was like, well, if they were to get angry, then they were going to take it out on me. But we'd only just sort of been together for a few months, so I felt like I was admitting to her that I have and so I felt the pressure that I should be able to say to her, yeah, no, I would have handled it, that's fine, or like, would have kicked off, would have been no problems, like I would have, but I was
that
like,
sounds like you. Yeah.
But I remember like saying to her, like,
I've never heard you say the phrase "kicked off."
But I remember feeling like, well, I don't think this is something Penny would value, like the fact that I could like maybe fight people to try and protect us in that situation. But I said, I don't want to ever get in a fight. I don't know how to. I've never been in a fight. I would not know what to do. And you just put me in a position where I felt like I maybe I potentially would have to do that. And that was, and I felt like, well, this in a weird way, even though I know she hates that stuff, I hope this isn't disappointing to her.
Yeah,
there's something in me that believes, even though, you know, I know there's not like an expectation that just because I'm a man that I should be able to like be the one who like fights and like defends us. But there is still something in me where I believe that, you know, women would find it like attractive if I did.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
But there is something in me because of just how, well, particularly men and women are viewed, and how men are like kind of traditionally viewed through story and film and everything. It's like the man should be able to defend. And it's always been painted in a way which is attractive. It's like to be able to like be tough enough to. So on one hand, I go, in that story, I go like, yeah, well, probably, of course, Penny wouldn't expect you to do that. And of course, Penny doesn't want you to be that guy. But at the same time, it's like, part of me thinks like, but maybe it would be kind of cool if you did.
Like in a movie,
I mean?
like you see in a movie, like in that situation where those 5 guys come and pick on me heaps, and I'm like, no, don't. And then all of a sudden I turn around and bash all of them. You'd be like, whoa, that was cool.
Yeah. Like I do have a,
That's what happens in movies.
Yeah, it happens in movies. And I feel like sometimes I've had this like fantasy of one day like secretly learning like a martial art, like not telling anyone. It's being this like secret thing. And then if ever anyone like attacks us, I can, this is just, remember in primary school, pressure points? Remember how, like, God, there was always one kid at school who knows all the pressure points. You know, Simon knows all the pressure points. There are 4 pressure points that you need to know. You know? So I had this like fantasy of like learning pressure points, and if someone ever attacks us, I can just go, dop, 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 and then they just like drop to the floor. I don't know why. It's not an helpful thing.
But like you see so many stories of that, like in the movies where like an underdog actually is really good at fighting, and then we all love them because they.
Yes. I don't know if you know Jack Reacher with the Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
There's a scene that's exactly this scenario, and it's like watching it, you're like, this is a boy's fantasy. Like the way this whole plays, it's just like exactly what you're talking about. I think I do need to bring up something. I didn't mention it before, but that question makes me think about the pressure to like the scenarios that you guys are talking about. Because when I was quite young, a friend of mine was beaten up in the city and has a permanent acquired brain injury, and he was one of my closest friends. I've from a young age, I was talking before about that scenario of friends fighting and me never wanting to because I was scared. But then I also pretty early on, this was been when I was 19, he was turning 20, it was his 20th birthday. I realized pretty early that that all of that is a fantasy, like the whole defending someone's honor or any kind of glory in a fight, because the person I knew was never the same again because of a fight that he didn't start. He was just chased because he said something that someone took offense to. So, yeah, I think I felt pressure, but then our friendship group was really tragically experienced how bad it can go really early on in our young adult life. So it kind of dispelled the fantasy of violence pretty early for me. Yeah. Yeah, so although I was confronted with the reality of it, like it only reinforced to me how scared I was of fights at pubs and stuff because I'd seen how badly they can go. But my inability to know what to do instead, like to diffuse a situation in a quite manly way, or to how to act, it only contributed to my feeling of not being what society would deem like a real man.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like if in reference to the hypothetical situation with Jam before, how does that, like your knowledge that you can't pull out the pressure points, how does that like make you feel?
I think like pressure points aside, in a real serious way, I feel really scared and sad just to think about that possibly happening and not being able to do enough. I think I would feel so guilty and responsible. I think what would probably be the hardest part about it would be if I didn't try. And I think because I'm worried that I would be like so scared and just like I would like flight. I would not run away, but I would like, was it fawn, which is the third one. I'd be so worried that I would just like panic and not be able to do anything or not have the skills or strength or something to be able to do something. I would worry. I would feel so. I just don't know how I'd get over that. I'd feel so guilty.
Would you feel around the question, the framing of these? Would you feel like emasculated, or would you just feel disappointed in yourself?
I think I probably would. I think
I would definitely. That's yeah.
I think I'm now thinking about like and it's not the right thing to be focusing on, but the story being retold.
Oh yeah.
I would feel embarrassed that like I couldn't do enough or I was there. So when the story is being retold and like, oh, so you were there? I was like, yeah, I was there, but I didn't like what, the temptation to lie would be big. The temptation to kind of make up a story which makes me look
a little bit better.
That's a horrible thing to say, and that's kind of shameful to say that. But I don't think I would lie, but I can imagine myself being tempted to save face, so I'm not like embarrassed that I was there and didn't do anything or didn't do enough.
I think I felt the story I told before. I felt quite emasculated by that scenario with Penny, in that like saying to her, "Can you please not put me in that situation because I wouldn't know what to do." I've definitely felt I felt a bit pathetic, to be honest.
Yeah, I can totally see why, but isn't that like a crazy situation in the fact that most likely, from all my understanding of any kind of violence, doesn't matter if you're Superman, if there are 5 guys who want to hurt you, you're going to get the shit kicked out of you.
Yeah.
And to want to avoid that situation makes you feel emasculated. It's kind of a nuts situation.
Yeah. But that's the like pressure of society or societal norms or what we've seen or what's been condoned. So yeah.
Well, now I'm just imagining like, well, if I was in a situation with so take it, not the Jam scenario, but if I was in like a group of guys, or even if like the 3 of us, if the 3 of us were out at a pub and some, our rivals from the Imperfects podcast come at us,
Brian, Pew and Shosh.
Yeah, if like these guys kind of come at us and they like pick a fight with us and they just start going at us, I would definitely feel the pressure to fight if you guys were.
Ah, interesting.
Like I would feel more emasculated if I then was like, oh, I'm getting out of here. If we like if you guys like turned and were like you started like defending yourself and punching on or kicking off like Hugh does, and if I didn't join in at the same time, like if my instinct was to run and your instinct was to fight, I would feel I'd feel embarrassed.
Well, that was my friendship. That was some of my friends and my life as a late teens.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if there's something I'd like to inject into the idea of masculinity, but I think because it's such a complicated thing and I'm sure it shows up differently. There's a million different ways to be a man. How many men are there in the world? Probably 4.5 billion different ways. But I think the idea of wisdom is something that is not talked about enough. And I think the wisdom to know how to get out of dangerous situations should be celebrated more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That don't involve violence.
That don't involve violence. Yeah, exactly. And a wisdom to be able to navigate difficult situations in any area of life without violence. Yeah, anyway.
So I just remembered, I had a memory then of, it just speaks perfectly to this question, but I was playing a football game once for like my football club, and it was like a seniors game, so all men. And there was a huge fight that erupted on the side of the ground, spilled onto the hill, and it was massive, and it was pretty much everyone on the ground. I was at the other end, and I sort of ran towards it, but just sort of like got so scared because it was so violent. There was a lot of punches being thrown and just yelling and stuff. And I sort of just pretended I was like taking an opportunity to maybe get the ball. Like if the umpire threw the ball up, I was like, oh, I'm going to be opportunist to like, but the umpire just sort of dropped the ball and sort of ran towards everyone. I sort of stood near the ball acting as if like, well, if I start again, I'll get it. So I'm thinking about who's going to win here, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, after the game, it's all everyone was talking about. Everyone was talking about what they did. Yeah. And I was going, oh yeah, I just grabbed this bloke and I just like smashed him. And then I heard someone kicked me off, turned around and grabbed him. And then I just found myself going, yeah, I didn't know what was going on. I was just grabbing this guy, and then I felt this like someone came over the top of me, and I was telling these stories about, I wasn't going too far into it because I didn't want to be questioned any further on it because I just stood there watching. And then I remember we got to training on Tuesday night, and a coach said, like very excitedly, he goes, boys, we've got the footage of the fight. We can watch it after training. And I was like, oh God, what did I say I was doing? Anyway, there was just someone had like this is back in like 2001, 2002. Someone was like home camera that they had filmed it, a parent had filmed it. But they had like the whole thing, every single person, what they were doing. And we watched it, and it was like everyone was celebrating who was the most.
Wow.
There was like 2 or 3 guys who were so involved, threw so many punches, and they were like the heroes. And we watched it again with the view of who didn't do anything, and everyone was pissing themselves at them. And I was one of them. And I was like, didn't you say you were like, and I went, oh, it just happened so fast, I can't remember. You were like 50 meters away. And I was just like, I am not going near that. That looks awful. But even like, I was quite a confident person back then in myself.
But you felt like you had to make something up.
Yeah, I felt like I had to say I was involved. I wasn't. Like I wasn't involved, but I felt like I had to say, yeah, I was in it. But there was 2 things that happened. We celebrated everyone who threw punches, and then we laughed at everyone who really didn't do much. And that to me was like
societal pressure.
Yeah, the societal pressure to lie and like just go. Like I wish now I could go, no, it's a stupid thing to do. It's just a local game of football. I don't get punched in the face by someone for no reason. You guys are fucking idiots, honestly. I don't want to play anymore. I quit.
Wow.
I wish I could have said
good on you.
Yeah, that would have been great.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay, next card. Have you ever exhibited behaviour that you didn't realise at the time could have reinforced a woman or women or a group of women feeling unsafe?
I think the word unsafe for my examples maybe, actually I don't know. In the 5 minutes of my life when I've been single, and I spoke about this on the Chanel Contos episode a little bit, but just this how terrified I was because I was in a long-term relationship for most of my 20s and then became single kind of for the first time in my adult life, and it's sort of all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, I now need to be out there like meeting people and potentially hooking up with people, and I had no practice and was so nervous and didn't know what to do, didn't know what the right things, all this sort of stuff. And there was one girl that I saw as like a one night thing, and I knew her, and because I didn't know what I was doing, and for whatever reason I felt like I needed to appear like I was really adept and experienced. There was no communication with her at all in what was going on. I was sort of trying to do, like we talked about in the Chanel Contos episode, I was trying to kind of like replicate like passionate love scenes that I'd seen in movies or what a confident lover looks like, because I don't know what it actually, how this actually goes. And I was at her apartment, and then I left after it, and then didn't really contact her that much afterwards. Even though I knew her, I didn't feel confident enough to be able to contact her and say like, hey, I'm really sorry about how I behaved. That was completely disrespectful to just come into your house, act in a way, and like, I should say right now that this was consensual. I was just a bit, I can't think of the right word.
Clumsy?
Clumsy is it, yeah. I was clumsy, but tried to hide the clumsiness because I didn't want her to think I was clumsy. I wanted her to think that I was very experienced and whatever. And so instead of contacting her afterwards and saying,
just talking and communicating,
saying like, I'm really sorry, that should have been more of a gentleman. I should have been more respectful. I should have been more present with you. I just wish I told her that I was nervous and I wish I asked her how she was feeling. But I was too in my own world to think about how that would have affected her. And then months later, one of her friends said something to me at a thing and said, hey, I really think you should apologize to her for just disappearing, because I did. And I hate that. I hate, like, what a dick to do that. And I disappeared because I was embarrassed about my performance, all the while she might have been feeling used. And how fucked that I didn't even think of that. And so when her friend said that, I was I acted shocked, but deep down I wasn't shocked that I needed to do that. I was like, that, yeah.
So would you get in contact with her now?
I was just thinking that I would, because just talking about it now and thinking back on that time, I don't remember exactly how I handled it or what I said to her after her friend told me that the way I behaved was like disrespectful, and I don't know exactly I can't remember exactly what I said, but I'm pretty sure I could have done it better. And so, yeah, so I was actually just thinking that I will get in contact with her, and it is something that I want to do, and give myself another chance at respecting her and acknowledging that I didn't behave in the way that I should have.
Yeah, I can understand that. My answer to that question is yes. I'm so ashamed to say that I absolutely have been involved in situations that made women feel unsafe. I realise that retrospectively. I really have to hasten to add that at the time, I definitely didn't think that, because I didn't think, but I didn't think it was girls, the female would have felt unsafe. But I played team sport with a group of blokes from the age 14 to 36. So, it's things like, I have a memory of, again, I thought it was funny at the time and I didn't think about the female's perspective, but there was, where I played cricket, there was a lot of foot traffic, a lot of people would walk around the ground and often would be warming up for training. Like, there were about 50 guys who were training for cricket. And if like an attractive girl was walking around the ground, someone would say, we should do a calf stretch, meaning to do a calf stretch, you lean against a fence and like you sort of to stretch your calf out. And we'd all run towards the fence and all stretch on the fence, all 50 of us. So, and the joke was that we were pretending we were stretching, but we're actually looking at this girl. Now, in my head, if I thought about it properly, I'd think back then as a 20-year-old when it was happening, and this happened like when I was coach as well, like I'm not saying someone else, I was a big part of it. So I thought it was like a funny thing. But now when I look back on it, like if you are a female walking past the cricket ground and 50 guys run towards a fence and
terrifying, yeah.
And they're probably laughing and like, it's a really fucking uncomfortable thing, So I was a part of that. Absolutely. And it just to say again, at the time, I didn't think, oh, good, we're making this girl feel unsafe. It was just, I was in my own head about, it's a funny thing for us to pretend that we're stretching.
Yeah.
There's, just on what you were saying before, Ryan, I think about situations where I was single from age 28 to 35, really. And I remember a situation where I don't remember, I knew this person would be able to answer the question whether I felt unsafe or not. I don't think they did. But I remember trying to convince them that we should be intimate. Like I remember trying to convince them, like putting forward an argument to why we should, and she was kind of laughing about it, but joking that we shouldn't. And it was like, but I just kept arguing it. And like on the topic of consent, like, you know, that is, and she was always, I feel like if you asked her if you felt, did you feel unsafe at any point? I'm pretty sure she would say no, but like I think back to that and it's just, I'm so ashamed of that. Like it was like an argument if we should do this.
But I guess that's the thing that we now know, being older and slightly wiser, is that we can assume that she doesn't feel unsafe, but we don't often, most of the time, we don't actually know what her previous experiences are, and we don't know what situations she's been in, and so we don't know what we're triggering when we do things that we deem to be like not a big deal. So I think that's the big learning that I've had in the last little while is that, you know, that we can't assume that the thing that we do is fine, because unless we communicate with the person and get absolute clarity that like, yes, this is fine, or I do feel safe.
I don't think I should have said, I think if you ask her, should say, because it's not really the point. Like she might have felt unsafe and I'll never know. I'll just never know. I don't think I should. I think I didn't want to paint a picture I was doing anything I wasn't like being aggressive. I think I was trying to be quite funny. I was trying to funnily argue why we should. But I shouldn't say, if you asked her, if she was here, she'd say I felt safe, because it is absolutely not the point. It was, she had said she didn't want to, and I was persistently saying, not doing anything, but I was arguing that we should, not in a heated way, but I was, and that's, I just think of that situation, just think, you're a fucking, like, you're a fuckwit.
But I think
she said no.
But I think
So,
what you're explaining, I think, is such a common situation.
Yeah.
With men, and with men being that way to women. I think that is, you know, we've grown up kind of with a bit of a it was in high school, I remember it being not like condoned in a way where an authority figure has said like this is okay, but as acceptable behavior in high school for how far can you get with a girl? Like that was like, it's like, what base did you get to? It's sort of like this badge of honor, you know, first, second, third base to get home. It's like, oh God. And so then as a guy, if you're carrying that around and you're carrying around this idea of like the further you get, the more you can brag, then when you're in the situation, then the instinct potentially is to like see how far you can get, because then it's all for like what you can tell Du Bois on Monday. It's like, and then so many men will just carry that through the rest of their life.
That's another way I feel like I've contributed to that, women feeling unsafe, and I'm not hiding behind this at all. I was very much a big part of this, but it's like, it was sexual conquest, so that kind of stuff is very much part of your currency as a male. I won't say for any sporting club, I don't know, I'm not part of any sporting clubs now, but certainly when I was growing up, it absolutely was, and it was celebrated, and it was like stories of what happened, which is no one's business, like, but they're shared openly, and I was a part of that, and that absolutely is something I feel really embarrassed about and really ashamed about. There's even I feel quite proud of the club that I play for, because the current captain actually banned that. A really young guy.
Wow.
And he came as captain really young, would be 23, 24, and he said, that's not happening. We're not sharing stories of that kind of stuff.
That's like that. I mean, and I know that we're coming at it from a far different lens than what, you know, these sort of classic quote unquote, you know, guys, these conquesty guys, they come at it from a different place. But like, to me, it's like, that's heroic.
Yeah.
Like that is so fucking hard to go into a club as the new captain and like essentially.
Well, he was much younger than everyone else around as well. And I wasn't there anymore. But if someone was to say to him, oh, like Hugh Van Collenberg used to play at your club, and like he'd go, yeah, well, he used to share those stories. Like he was part of that. And I haven't had a chance to congratulate him on that yet, but someone told me that he'd said, those stories don't happen anymore. It's not anyone's business except for yours and the person. This is not celebrated here. And I love so many people to do with that place. It's an incredible place. Despite I just shared those stories which would have been common in all sporting clubs. I'm not having a go at my club, but I am so in awe of, we've had people pay for our club and go and play for Australia and do incredible things. Fergus is the person I am most in awe of, because
he's a legend.
It is much harder to do. In my view, it's much harder to stand up and say, I'm ending this culture that has always been here at this club and this sporting club, and in all sporting clubs really. It stops while I'm captain. That to me is more impressive than playing for Australia. It really is.
Like every now and again, I do think about that story that I told, and I feel really like ashamed, because I just don't feel like that really represents me, and I didn't handle it well, and I had to be told to apologize. Like it didn't occur to me it did occur to me, but I didn't have the courage to be able to actually do it. But even hearing you tell that, Hugh, like after I told that story, I was regretting it immediately. I was like, I don't know if and I was thinking about like, oh, maybe I'll edit this out.
Yeah.
But then when you told your story, I was like, oh yeah, no, this needs to be said. What?
No, because I was thinking I might take mine out.
Oh, right.
No,
Okay.
but it's important that it stays. But
it's important, but I think the reason I say that is because it shows why it is so important for men to talk about it. I think I've never told that to any of my friends, never, because it makes me look bad, and it's like, and I don't want to look bad, but also like when I look at myself, when I like sort of step outside of myself and I look at myself, it's like, that's not who I want to be looking at. I don't want to be looking at a guy who doesn't consider how his actions affect others. And I'm just so glad that I am now talking about it, because if we don't talk about how wrong this sort of behaviour is, it won't stop.
Yeah. I think I reflect on the stories I've told a lot, especially of late. I don't know why they've been in my head a lot recently, but with a bit of sadness, I think, because I wish so much I just switched my brain on in those situations and actually thought like a good person, rather than I'm going to be entertaining and get currency here. And I think it coincided with me not playing cricket very well. I was very, very good when I was very young. And then for some reason, I don't know why, it just got worse and worse and worse. And so I felt like to hang on to some kind of currency, because I wasn't playing that well, I could be a guy who tells really funny stories about things that happened when I was out at night and drinking, and never thinking about the other person that was involved, or never thinking. And by the time I finished, I wasn't doing it so much when I was 33, 34, 35. But, as a 30-year-old, I definitely was. 31, 32-year-old, I was definitely telling those stories and being a big part of that. And there were like 18-year-olds at the club. There were like young boys there who would look up to me as a senior player at the club, life member at the club, and then I'm passing this rot on to them. Like I look back on that with a great sadness. But then, yeah, I just regret it. I just wish so much I'd thought about the kind of person that I wanted to be, and also that I wanted the people at the. Yeah, I mean, I think I did. To defend myself a bit, I think I did a lot of good stuff at the club as well around trying to help people develop. But
should we go through your top 10?
I think I did some really good stuff there around personal development for players. But that area, that one specific area, the way I celebrated that and was a big part of that culture.
But I don't think anyone would listen to this, particularly people who've listened to this podcast before or know you. I don't think that doesn't. No one's going to think that defines you as who you are. I think like there's no doubt you would have done so much good stuff at that club. Like you've done so much good stuff in your life. But I totally understand the want to be able to like buffer the bad stuff with good stuff. But it doesn't define you.
It's a great process to go through, just reflecting on it, even though it's uncomfortable. Even to do it when you're not talking to anyone, you're just thinking about it.
Even though we're not recording and we'll never release this, it still feels uncomfortable.
But even just the process of me just thinking about it by myself, which I have been, as I said, a lot recently, it's really uncomfortable. But I think it's an important thing to do, because what it does is it makes sure in similar situations in the future, you don't. It gives you a direction to aim towards, and you sort of you go, well, I don't like the way I was previously, and in future situations, when a situation arises where, you know, the example for me would be now as a 44-year-old happily married with 3 kids, you know, it's not going to be like, I won't be in the situation where I'm talking about that kind of stuff with men again. But if I hear it being talked about, I'll go, oh, I've thought about this and I don't like it. I've thought long and hard about this. I don't like this, and I'm going to say something here. Like I would say something, not that my friends would talk about that now, but hypothetically, I'd be able to go, we're not talking about that. Like we're 44 years old. We're not, that's not us. We're so much better than that.
Yeah.
But if I don't reflect on it, I probably don't get to that point, I don't reckon.
Yeah. And also I think potentially an awareness of, for raising like a future generation of men and boys, the realization, I think, that if you don't talk about it, the behavior can go unchecked to a degree.
Yeah.
Like, I just thinking about I can't remember. It was I think it was off the back of the episode we did last time, and I was at a Bucks party with some mates, and a mate of mine who I did not expect to come up and say how much he loved the app came up and told me
about the men's violence towards women.
The men's violence towards women, and his perspective on some stuff that I didn't think he would have thought that deeply about a lot of this stuff brought on this conversation between the two of us, and he was talking about how fucked some of the things are that women have to experience and go through, and just having that conversation, I just saw him in a different light, and we were able to ask some stuff and talk about some stuff, and then that spawned a little bit of a conversation at the Bucks party that you would not expect to be happening at a Bucks party, and I've thought about that a lot since, because I think the more that he spoke about it and other people, and the sort of viral nature of that conversation happening, means that I think there's an awareness that if you don't speak about this stuff, it goes unchecked in raising a future generation. Yeah. Okay, one more card, I think.
Yep.
Okay. What does respect and consent sound and look like in your relationships?
The first thing that comes to mind is listening, like just as much as possible.
Well, I think the extension of that, which I've often thought about, I've thought about this a lot recently, and this is just relationships in general, but I think particularly when it comes to consent, it's listening, but it's also like presence, and it's like being in that moment and not so say if you're a guy and you're with a woman, not to be present with her, listen to her, understand who she is, what does she like, what does she feel safe with, all these things, and not just assume that because you did this thing with this other girl that like, oh, she liked that, I'll do that with this girl. Like that you can't assume that, like, because everyone is very, very different. Like I wouldn't if I played golf with my mate Pete, and I was like played golf with this guy. It was a really good day. We played golf, and I met a new guy called Harry. I wouldn't just rock up with my golf clubs and say, "Let's play golf." Harry would be like, "What are you talking about? I don't play golf." It's like, I played golf with Pete.
Pete likes golf.
He loves golf. You're a guy. Don't you love golf as well? Let's go. Let's
ready.
play. I'm teeing up right now. No, I don't want to play golf. Oh, God. I brought my clubs. Oh, okay, I'll just go home and not play golf, will I? Thanks a lot. So it's a terrible analogy, but
I think it's pretty good.
It's not too bad.
So I guess like listening, but it's also like being present with the person that you're with and treating them as a whole new person that is nothing like anyone else you've ever met.
Yeah, I think listening and empathy, but empathy is like putting yourself in someone else's shoes, like properly thinking, what is it like to be this person right now, and why they're saying or acting the way that they are, and what's leading to that, and how's the best way to respond to what this person is, how they're acting at the moment, maybe.
Yeah.
I think for me, all of that, I agree with all of that. But for me, they're all kind of downstream of the idea of power, because I think consent and respect can only be truly present when you're not trying to get power over the other person, or there's no struggle for power. I could be wrong here. It's just occurred to me that, like in my relationship, to go back a bit, I remember reading this book years ago called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, and there was a psychologist that was doing these experiments, and the idea was predicting the success of a relationship. And they would get couples in a room, and they would get them to have an argument or like a disagreement. And the idea was over something trivial. So if one of them always wanted to put on a TV show and the other one didn't like that TV show, it was that level of disagreement. And then they would get them to have a conversation. They'd say, like, go have this conversation about this. And there'd be a team of psychologists that would sort of analyze the discussion and have different weighting for different words that were used, and then would mark them down. They were trying to work out if you could read from the way that people talk to each other and the respect that they gave each other in these conversations, predict the success of the relationship. They came back about 10 years later and layered their initial predictions over the success of the relationships. And this guy who ran it got it down to a point when Malcolm Gladwell caught up with him where he's like, if I'm in a cafe, I reckon if I overhear a relationship, I can predict in about 30 seconds. If I give that he could predict to within to 85% accuracy whether that relationship would last. And the thing that was the most pervasive was when someone in trying to win an argument tried to put the other person down in the process to gain a level of power above them in that argument or in that discussion. And if you hear that, it's a really, really bad sign for the future of the relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think in the context of that, they were talking about a relationship failing, as in no longer being together. But I think it feels to me like it also is the beginning of a relationship failing in the way that a person would be trying to seek power, could then lead to things like coercive control or financial abuse, maybe acts of non-physical violence, so verbal intimidation, and then in worst case into horrific acts of physical violence as well. I could be wrong. I'm no expert here, but it feels to me like it's all downstream of trying to get power over the other person.
Yeah. I mean, consent specifically, like thinking about that, what does consent look like in a relationship? My mind goes straight to like being sexually intimate,
Yeah.
And there's a power element there as well. Like if you're talking about with your angle, but to me, it's like just I don't want to. Cool. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know. That's fine.
Yeah.
There's no expectation that something is owed or something.
Yeah. Maybe I'm thinking too much about like the shame I feel from that situation I spoke about before, but like it's yes or no. It's yes or no, and then it's accepting that.
Yeah.
That is the final answer.
Yeah. Lock it in.
It's good to reflect on all this stuff. The other thing that really stood out to me that I just wanted to mention was talking about examples where we have maybe been involved in scenarios where women feel unsafe. What stood out to me was that the examples that we gave came from places of insecurity. Like that's what led to that behaviour.
So true.
So you were feeling insecure about being single, not really know what to do. I was feeling insecure very specifically because I was in with a group of men and my currency when I was young was being really good at cricket, and all of a sudden I wasn't that good and felt desperate to hang on to some kind of currency. And that sort of, I think a lot of this stuff comes back to a male insecurity. And I'm not here saying, so here are the answers to this, but I think that's what it comes down to a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that it goes beyond making women feel unsafe. I'm sure insecurity is at the root of a lot of these issues. And I think that's an important thing to remember in this conversation.
Yeah.
On a lighter note to finish, Josh, I've looked at you a lot in my life. I'd have to say, we've done 2 episodes today. This is the most handsome I've ever seen you look.
Well, I mean, I'm not insecure now.
I mean,
have you noticed today he looks particularly handsome?
I do think that, I'm not just saying this, Hugh, I'd say the same about you.
Oh, wow.
Your beard?
I mean, if it's okay to say, I think the new beard,
okay,
you got a bit of a tan, I mean, yeah, it's looking good.
Oh, that's really nice.
It's looking good.
Not why I said it to start that, but I especially thought of the episode. Well, I thought of both episodes at I was like, gosh, Josh is looking so handsome today.
Oh, thank you. I bought a new T-shirt, so maybe
no,
it's
that's not your face. It's very specifically your face.
Thank you.
Your eyes, hair.
I notice you've both received compliments.
Well, it's funny. I have been meaning to say, since coming back from your holiday, Ryan, I think you've been looking especially fresh, I'd have to say.
Really?
And quite beautiful. Yeah.
That's so unexpected. Thank you so much, Josh.
Oh, that's
so
fine.
lovely.
I can't believe it's taken me till now to bring it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm speechless.
Yeah. But no, you look beautiful.
Yeah. Thanks, mate.
Well, anyway, after that very odd segue, I do think it is, and the whole point of us doing this conversation is because the world can only benefit from men having these conversations, as difficult as they are to have and as awkward as they are to have. But at the end of the day, to me, it's one of the things that will contribute to a change in behaviour, and reflecting on behaviour we're not proud of and thinking about the kind of person we want to be can only put us in the right direction.
And so if others want to do it, they can. These cards are on they're on our Instagram, and they're also on the Teachers Consent Instagram, and you can go on there and give it a crack.
We'll link to it.
And it might feel like a really big step to like get a group of mates together to discuss the cards. But in the first instance, I would be
just try and do it by yourself.
I'll be trying to do it by yourself. Have a think about it, have an honest think about to yourself. And you can it's just you be completely honest with yourself, reflect on the questions. And then you might even, the next step potentially could be thinking about a mate of yours, if you're comfortable sending them to him, just to say, I answer these questions, see how you go with this.
I mean, the most legendary level of this is bringing it up at the footy club.
Yeah, that is.
I mean, that's legend level.
Yeah, it is.
Fergus would do that.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely. He's probably already done it. He's fallen asleep this morning.
Been there. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Great.
Yeah.
Good chat.
And a huge thank you to Chanel and Tess and the team at Teachers Consent. We feel very proud to be collaborating with you on this incredible work, which will gain you Australian of the Year in the next few years.
Yes.